Hey everyone, in this video we're going to draw the lowercase b and lowercase d. They're also not mirrors of one another, so we'll take a look at how that works in the serif and sans serif versions. So in our glyphs file, we're going to grab our b and our d, and I'm also going to open our lowercase h and o this time. With all these selected, I'm going to start with the backbone of that lowercase b in the sans serif version because that'll be a little bit easier. First, I'll grab the stem from that H and I'll paste it in that lowercase b. And then I'm going to grab both of these curves of that lowercase o. So I'll double click, hold shift and double click that second one, which will let me grab both of them. And I can paste them in here. Now this is generally what I want my b to be doing. I'm going to build it from these two parts. But oftentimes our o is a little bit too wide and we actually want it to be more similar to the width of our N or our H. Like we've done in some other videos, we can add a component, and I'm going to add a lowercase h, which will bring in that lowercase h just as a guide about how wide this should be. So with that up, I'm going to again select my lowercase o, and I'm going to bring him in until he's about the same width that I want this to be. And we'll end up using some of those curves as a note and figuring out really how we want this to work. Now, like I've done in some other letter forms, I'm going to draw a new shape from scratch, just using the lowercase o curve out there and the shoulder of that lowercase h as a guide of how to make this. So with my pen tool or tap P, I'm going to do the inside first and the outside on the way back around. So I'll start inside here somewhere, and I know that it's going to look something like this. I know I want an anchor point somewhere up there that'll match my H. Eventually I will come down and match that O, but Glyphs won't let me do that the first time around, so we'll come through here. I'll bring one down there. And now I'm going to think about mirroring this top section with that bottom section. So just like we did when we were drawing this H and lowercase n where we're pulling that down, we're going to do the same thing here, and we're going to end our letter form up here closer to where this O is going to be. Again, going back, I'm going to start it pretty narrow so it matches what the n is doing up there, what the h is doing rather. And then I'm going to go through and get all my points near where I need them to be. Now looking at this bit, I know I want it to be round here, but I also want to sort of match that H. So I'm going to go somewhere in the middle here. We can fudge and play with it and figure out what it really needs to do in just a little bit. Then I'm going to end with it there, and I'll connect that point at the end so we have something to work with. Now I'm going to go back through and get my points to where they actually need to be. So I know this guy needs to be there and this one there. I'll see if I can match my handles. That's my O handle actually, and we'll get him working through there. I know I want this point there, and that handle is much too long, so if I grab the right handle I can see my line come in there. I know this is the one that I drew and I want it to be about down there. I'm going to try to match this bit of my O, and so I know that I have this curve that's working in here. And this through here is going to get quite challenging. So we'll just work with him a little bit to try and guesstimate what he should look like. But we're going to need to put in some work through there. Mid-roll time. Be sure to like and subscribe to the video if you haven't already. It's going to be the best way to support these videos so I can keep putting them out and keep making them free to access. All right, back. Once I delete this tangled mess of letters, so if I grab the outside ring of that O and delete it, I can grab the inside ring of that O. Whoops. Well, it opened up my H instead. If I grab the inside ring of this O, or maybe I'll just delete the H, and we'll grab the inside ring of that O. Now you can see where I'm at in this lowercase b. He's pretty clunky, and he needs a little bit of work. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to adjust this bottom bit because it seems like it's going to be the most manageable to me. I know this is the width that I want, so I can work through getting this weight to be narrowest down here at the bottom. I also know that that line is pretty good to where I want it because of the measuring that I just did. So I'm going to work through here and really try to figure out how to make this a really nice and smooth curve. Make sure that it feels similar to what was happening up there, but doesn't work too hard to do that. These curves over there are throwing me off a little bit, so I'll just delete that point. I can hold space and arrow key around so I can move this point so I can see what's really happening. And now I'm going to work to try and finagle this thing to be a recognizable character. With my H open there, that's actually really helpful. I might go in that type tool and type an O over here, so I've got all of them open. That way I can see what my lowercase b needs to do and how it needs to work. For instance, I can see that I need this to be quite a bit rounder out here and that these points aren't going to work in those places. I'm looking at this and saying he probably needs a lot more weight down here, so I can bring out those handles to start to feel like it matches this weight over here. I can bring this guy over and start to match this shoulder a little bit. All of these things I'm doing, I'm working to try and balance out how this B is working so he feels like he belongs to this set of characters. Looking at that, he does have a bit that matches here, but he's quite awkward through that weight. You can see the weight feels like it's a little bit higher up here rather than down there, versus in my O and my H where it's really balanced through the middle bit. So I might have to bring this point down. You can see by moving that point up and down, it's going to adjust where that weight is and where it fits. And I'll have to finagle my way through to get this B to do really what I want to do, which is sit upright, not feel like he's leaning left or right, and get these things to be in all the places they want. In my experience in type design, there's always just one little move that's waiting to happen that'll make it feel good. And sometimes it takes a long time to get to that one little move, to figure out what needs to be done in order to make your letter feel right. But there's a great moment of euphoria when you get it doing exactly what it needs to do, which we'll try to get through that here in a minute. So that's not feeling too bad. This is still quite rough through here. That curve could be quite a bit better, but we'll move on so that we don't spend too much time on this lowercase b. At this point, we can go ahead and duplicate it over to that serif version. I'll grab all my components, copy it, and paste it in the serif version. Now the serif version can be tricky. We can do a lot of things. There's a lot of options we have when designing our serif lowercase b. Again, we're going to start by going to our lowercase h, grabbing that serif, and bring him over to this guy. We'll snap him up here really quickly, and bring that ear down. And that gives us a good start. There are a lot of things that we could do with this bottom serif now. In some typefaces, there isn't actually a serif there. They'll have their letter form sort of come up, and it looks like their B almost ends in that kind of a stroke. If that were the case, we'd pull over this point in here, we'd make this match a little bit better, and we'd end our B something like that, which is quite nice if you have a stark difference between your thins and your thick strokes. Other typefaces will have a smaller, less noticeable serif, so it matches that sans serif a little bit better. So I'm going to duplicate this, and if I flip it and reverse it, and instead of having the full-fledged serif, what I want to do is just bring up this negative space a little bit. So I'm going to put that guy there as my measuring stick, and I'll pull my point of my B up just a little bit, and they'll do something more similar to that. For our typeface, this is a little bit sharp, especially in that serif version when I'm looking at it in context of some other serif letters. We can go to our H here and look at what it's going to look like. But it also feels like he's on the right path. What we want to do is have that B feel like it belongs to this serif. So at the top bit, we know that they belong because they're identical. So in our bottom bit, we want to get those to match a little bit. What I might do is match that thickness there and imagine it were turned before angling it in here. Let me show you what I mean. If I duplicate this serif and bring him down here, this time around I'll flip it, or spin it rather. To spin things, you can enter the degree that you want to rotate something, and then click the rotation tool. Then what I might do is I'm going to add a point in here. With my pen tool, you can see when I'm over a line, it gains that little plus symbol. I'm going to add that point there and then bring back down my serif, and I'll put that serif down there right at the bottom. So now he has a sort of flatter angle. Now I'm going to bring that point up, and I can bring it just a little bit higher so that when I'm looking at this lowercase b, I have this little tail here. It's like a pseudo serif that has a tone similar to those serifs. It's still a little thick. I could probably bring him up a little bit so he comes even closer to matching that tone. But now I have this sharp-edged serif here and that sharp-edged serif there as well. And that helps me match those letter forms together. Looking at it one more time, I may want this to be just a little bit wider. So it did start with the same width as our lowercase h, which was much narrower than our lowercase o. And we're going to find a place in the middle here. Before, a lot of this curve was hidden by what was there. So now we've been revealed that that curve isn't quite right just yet. So we'll go in, we'll adjust this curve and try to fix him a little bit, just so that it matches and it feels more like it belongs. And we have a lowercase b. I might quick match my serif version, which we just brought out. We stretched him a little bit, and we brought this point down ever so slightly. So I have my sans serif b and my serif b. Now we can use a lot of this DNA to get to our lowercase d. This time it looks like we'll start with the serif version, where we will paste this in, and you might think again that it's just flipped, but really it's not. When we flip it, you can see there's a lot of crazy optics going on. When we were setting that lowercase b, we're filling in some of that shoulder the same way we did with our other characters that have that curve. So when we just flip it, it feels backwards. The hole here feels a little bit different than the white space over there. And so it doesn't quite work the same, though it does give us a good starting point for our points. I'm going to fix the serifs right away because I think that'll help when I'm looking at these. The serif on our lowercase d matches all the other serifs in our font, which means that they go to that left side. And this is a traditional thing. If you were doing something else horribly crazy with your font, you could change that. And now what needs to happen is that we need to rethink about how this curve works by pushing it back a little bit and raising this stuff up. So we want it to still feel like it's going to be upright. And the optical trick is that we're always reading from that left to right, giving characters that motion anyways. So now with this all together here, we can start to get that working and looking more like it's upright. We might even pick up those points just a little bit so that weight sits a little bit higher. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to fix that bottom serif. Unlike the lowercase b, it doesn't end this way. But we have done a character where we've already sorted this out in the lowercase u. So if we go back to our font file and change it to serif, you can see that we've already sorted this out in our lowercase u before. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and then I might even bring it in to that lowercase d as a component to figure out how this is working and where we found our success before. Now, of course, it looks like I pasted that lowercase d on the wrong layer, so we'll go in and we'll paste that serif that I have on my clipboard. Then we'll go and we'll copy this lowercase d over here as well. And we'll finish off the sans serif version because apparently that's the one we're working on at the moment. Guys, this happens all the time. There's no shame in it, and it's just a part of type design life. Now, with my lowercase u here, we can see that we pulled up these points quite a bit. We pulled them way up here, and that's because when we bring down this point here, it creates much more optical space in the middle there. You can see if we didn't bring these up, that it would look really filled in through that part there, and we want there to be a nice optical balance. So I'm going to move these out even. Maybe I'll move them along the line. We can let these points come through here, and maybe we'll move some of these handles down just a little bit, just so that we have a little bit more white space in there, and we can compare it to some of our other sans serif letters. Then we'll go back to our serif version, which we thought we were working on and then realized we weren't. We can go back in here and drop this lowercase u in to the file that we're working on. In here now, it looks like I've made something a little bit crooked in there. Maybe one of the times I moved something over, I wasn't holding shift. But I'm going to align my serifs to where they would be. So I'm going to match that lowercase u. I'm going to bring this point down. And the same thing that I just did on that sans serif version, I'm going to move these points up and start to more closely match what's happening in this lowercase u. When I delete that and look, we can see I didn't move this point up here yet, so we'll move him up. And now the lowercase d as a whole still needs a little bit of finagling. We've got some of my messy points from before. We can grab that sans serif version and move him over to the place that he belongs, which honestly makes me a little bit skeptical of my lowercase b. So we're going to go back and we're going to find the point that I missed. There he is. And that's where my mutation starts. That might be a danger of copying and pasting, is that if there's a mutation in any of your paths, that it can spell disaster for the rest of your letters. But now I'm looking at these two lowercase d's and thinking the two look great. This is the first letter pair that's going to use both our different side bearings. So our O, for example, has 50 on either side. On the lowercase d, that means our left side will have 50, and on both layers, 50 and 50. And our lowercase b, the right side will have 50. That's because these are curves. They match that lowercase o. Then we can grab our capital H and say it's 56 on that side. So it's 63, and this lowercase b here will be 56. My lowercase d was 63 in the sans serif and 56 in the serif version. At this point, it can be really helpful to start typing out some of the letters you have. So we have those letters, and we have N's and M's, O and H and I, J and L, and you can start to type with these letters all over the place. There's not really a rhyme or reason to how these are working, but we have enough characters that we can start looking and seeing how these are going to work, whether or not they are working together, how they're working in sans serif and serif versions, and making sure the tonality of our typeface is working well. When we look across these, it does feel like that. We might be able to manipulate our O a little bit. I wonder if the thins could be just a little bit thinner. But at this point, we're pretty pleased with how these are going, and we can move on to our next letter forms. Thanks for watching, and as always, I hope you were able to gain something along the way, even if it's just a hotkey or how to move some points around that is different than what you may have otherwise known. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos coming out every single week, and comment or tag or share with some other designers who you think would design some awesome fonts.